Everybody, welcome to episode 6 of Grace River Midweek. Antonie, this week we are now at chapter 6. Israel is at the walls of Jericho, and this story really comes down to one word. What is that?
Obedience.
Exactly. As the man said, we're looking at obedience today and why, honestly, it's something we need to do our whole lives.
Absolutely.
All right, Antonie. So we're going to start our midweek dive in a little bit differently this week. I want to ask you a question. Has there ever been a time where God has asked you to do something and you were like, what? Or it didn't make any sense at first?
Yeah, absolutely. I had lots of experiences like that. But let me tell you about one recent one that we had just a few months ago, um, and it was as simple as just obeying God's voice, having that unction. And I'm not saying that God always say, "Anthony, I'm talking to you." No, it's something that He speaks to us in our hearts sometimes.
Yeah.
But Jaden wanted to go and play outside, and he told me that he wanted to go. We live in a kind of a circle, kind of a environment where you can go around the circle and meet people on the other side of the circle. But as a good father, I didn't want him to wander off so far. And God kept on saying to me, "Listen, it's fine, let him go." And somehow he hooked up with this little boy, Liam, which you also know, who ended up coming to our church. And I realized how important it is to listen to God's voice, even with things so small. Because here Jaden goes and he meets this wonderful little boy. And at the end of the day, they came and joined Grace River Church. And it's just that simple thing of obedience. And it does not have to be like glamorous big things. It's sometimes the small things, Andrew,
Absolutely.
that we have to be obedient towards.
You're right. And that theme of obedience is something, it honestly could be the major theme, you could say, of the book of Joshua.
Absolutely.
And we see there may not be a better example of chapter 6, which we're now at. We're building up to this point of they're finally at Jericho. And you think you're getting ready. We have this battle. God's helped us cross the Jordan. All right, Joshua, what's the battle plan?
Yeah.
Well, here's the plan. You are going to, for 6 days, there are going to be trumpets. You're going to march around once. Okay. Day 7, you're going to go march on 7 times, blow the trumpets, and then you're going to shout. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to say anything. If you're an Israelite, what are you thinking if you hear that?
I'm telling you now, I mean, it's hard for me to keep quiet about what we're talking today. So imagine the Israelites knowing, because I mean, Rahab told them, "Listen, we know that this battle, this place is yours."
Yeah.
Knowing that, and I still have to keep quiet, that should be so hard for them to have done that.
It would be.
But it shows discipline.
Absolutely.
It shows obedience.
You hit it nail on the head right there. They had to make the decision. I had a professor at Regent say, we say often trust and obey, but really it's obey and trust. And you hit the nail on the head. Even as Rahab, non-Israelite, mentioned, God has already won the battle. So what does that look like? Knowing, we say obey and trust, but really it's because, as you mentioned, knowing who God is and what he's already done.
No, absolutely. It always starts with God.
Yeah.
And because if it's not starting with God, with who does it start then? It starts with you and me. And we are men of flesh and blood.
Yeah.
We can fall. We have our own things that can bring us down. We're sinful. But if it starts with God, I mean, obedience and then trust.
Yeah.
That's how it works. And I mean, God also told Joshua, "Listen, this is a done deal."
Yeah.
So I think in a way it was hard for them maybe to keep quiet and not say anything. But on the other hand, I think which kept them anchored kind of is the fact that Joshua knew and the people knew, listen, this is a done deal.
Absolutely. And Pastor John had this phrase earlier this week about just simplistic or simple obedience. And you mentioned it, and I know Pastor John mentioned it several times during service about just being quiet.
Yeah.
I think there's a temptation when we feel like we have to add on to something. So if God told us to do this, so maybe the Israelites said, okay, you know what? God, you said march on once. Maybe I'll do it 2 times. Or you know what? Maybe I'll say something to them as we're walking. There can be that temptation. If God says do this, to feel like, you know what? I need to, as God, just to make sure I need to add something to it. But rather it's about, in this case, just being quiet.
That's it.
And obeying.
Yeah, and I think if we look at the simplicity of that, you know, march around, nothing big.
Yeah.
Just march around. And it's almost that God is using the simplicity.
Yeah.
the things that are foolishness to men,
Mm.
as the New Testament says, to confound the wise. That's what I also see here. God uses this plain, straightforward thing of doing this and this and this, demanding obedience,
Yeah.
something that's obviously so, what really we only supposed to do, but he uses that, and at the end, he uses that simplicity to actually bring them the breakthrough that they need.
Absolutely. And we see here that the walls came down, very famous story, but it was because of what God was doing and their obedience. You even look at days 3 and 4, you're like, you know what, we're doing this again. You know, God, what's the next thing? But you think about it, what God was saying, I do the last thing I told you. Okay, day 2, I asked you to do Tuesday 1, walk around. Day 3 and 4, what's the last thing I told you? So it wasn't even this big thing, but rather just doing what he asked them to do. And I think, let me ask you this, why do you think there's a temptation that we feel to add on to it?
I think it's the fact that we want to feel that we have part of it,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some kind of control that we have.
Yeah.
And we normally do that, Andrew. I mean, there's many aspects in my own life where I felt that God is busy doing things and it goes so well, and then I mess it up by stepping into that perfect recipe that God has provided for me. But I want to be part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens with us as well. We can easily fall in that trap of saying, no, I want to be part of this.
Yeah.
Because I mean, after all, God gets all the glory, obviously,
Yeah.
but I want to have a part of that glory. And we know God does not share his glory with anyone.
Yeah. No, it's crazy to think, because I think you're absolutely right. But by our obedience, we are a part of it.
Absolutely.
Like God has asked us to be a part.
Absolutely.
And like in the case of the Israelites, he asked them to do this, and they said yes. So rather than, like, you know
That's
what?
it.
Trumpet sounds, he was a little off there. You know what? There's a crack in the wall there. How about you and I? Let's just sneak away.
Yeah.
By their obedience and thinking, you know what? I know also we think about now, okay, what is the wall that people are encountering in their own life? Maybe it just simply falls what God's asking. Just say yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the thing. I think we stare ourselves blind to this wall sometimes, and we think of, and it's human nature. I mean, this is how we are bent, isn't it? We've got a sinful nature. So our human nature says, listen, I've got this wall. How can I? You see, there's the unholy trinity. Me, I, myself. How can I make this work? And then ask God to bless what I'm planning. But obviously, it's not like trust and it's obedience first. What does God say? And then do what God told me to do.
Amen. And so thankful that, we're wondering, what has he asked us to do? He tells us in his word.
That absolutely.
Tells us in prayer. The simple things that we can overcomplicate. What has God asked me to do? Spend time with me.
Absolutely.
What does David write in the Psalms? One thing I ask for, one thing I seek, just to be in your presence. And as we see here, they had to follow the presence of the Lord in obedience. By doing that, they would recognize his voice and listen. And we see here the chapter ends by saying, so the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was all in the land. It wasn't about Joshua, but it was his obedience. Because he, as the leader, could be like, you know what, God? Okay, that's plan A.
Yeah.
Hear me out here. Yeah. Plan B. How often we be like, God, I hear you, but I have a plan B possibility here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We try to negotiate.
No, absolutely.
There was no negotiation from their leader.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we read on that passage, just to get a little bit back again, but Jericho's walls fell on the Sabbath day. And the significance of that is that God is still the Lord of the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because he gave them the victory. I mean, according to the law, they were not supposed to do anything. But God was doing something new. And I think also it's like a foreshadow of what Jesus came and did. That we're not under the law anymore, but that there's grace. Not throwing away the law and saying we've dismissed, but there's grace now. And that's what I also see. That obedience, which brings that grace factor in as well.
Absolutely. So honestly, our family activation step, our takeaway for today, we're going to keep it simple. It's going to be one word.
That's the one thing.
Obey.
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 Something I would say that's safe.
That's it's safe, but it's also one of the toughest things I think we encounter.
Absolutely. And it's so plain and simple. But yet, it can be challenging.
So we want to encourage you. There are so many things I think that we could say looking back on, and like Lord's asked us to do, and wondering, what is God asking me to do? Pray and ask. Often I had someone say, think back, what was the last thing he told you to do? Obey that. And also wondering, God, what do you say? He has his word available to us.
Amen. Amen.
So Antonie, I want to thank you for joining us today. And
thank you.
For those watching, like I said, simple obedience, doing what he's asked us to do, and willing to say, God, I obey you. I trust you because I know no matter who you are.
Amen.
So thank you, everybody,
Thank you, guys.
and take care.